most men work more than to aggravate women. I hated my daddy with a passion. I did. He used to threaten to burn the house down. He'd say, T! He'd call my mama T. I'm going to burn this house down with you and all them rats in it. We know full well who them rats was. I think about that time I decided that someday I was probably going to have to kill that son of a bitch. One night I was laying in bed with Mommy, sleeping there, and I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. I could hear Daddy's old rattle-trap truck bouncing up and down the washed-out trail to our house. I shook Mommy real hard because she was a sound sleeper, especially after working all day cutting timber. I said, quick, Mommy, get up, hurry, hurry. I hear Daddy's truck. Get out the back door fast. I know it'd beat her if she didn't run. Here's your shoes. I'll go get your coat. I told her to go to my sister's, but she wouldn't do it. Well, hide in the woods close enough so they can hear if you holler. As I was pushing her at the back door, she said, Fireball, I love you. I said, I love you too, Mommy. And I slammed the door. And then I run and hopped in the bed I shared with 3 sisters. It weren't long. We heard Daddy come in hollering and yelling, Where is that bitch, T? Get your sorry ass up and come fix me some supper. Then we heard him go into their room. What the hell? Then he comes stomping into our room. We all sat up straight in bed. He said, Where is that bitch? Is she in here? We said, No, we thought she was in her room. And then he come over to me, grabbed my arm hard and said, Hazel, I know you know where she's at. And I said, No, sir. I ain't got no idea. Mommy always told me to tell the truth, but I figured I wasn't lying because I didn't know exactly which bush she was hiding behind. I said, You want me to fire up the stove and heat you up some peas and cornbread? I'd do anything to get his mind off going after Mommy. He said, No, I'm so disgusted, I done lost my appetite. I'm just going to sit here till she come back. We all relaxed and lay down flat in the bed. I was worried about Mommy out there all by herself. But I must have dozed off because I woke up to the sound of Daddy slamming the front door. I waited until I could hear the sound of his old truck turn over. And then I jumped up to go get Mommy. I figured Daddy wouldn't be back anytime soon. Truth is, we never know where he was going or when he was coming back. We just hoped it'd be a long time. Things like I just told you happened many times. Many times. And sometimes it was even worse, though. Once, he would have killed Mommy if it hadn't been for my cousin Raymond being at the house at the same time. We could hear her beating on her in the next room. And Raymond said, We can't let him kill Aunt T. And he rushed into the front room with me right behind him. And there's Mommy on the stone hearth. Her long black hair was soaked in blood. Raymond was way braver than me. He told Daddy, You might kill me, but I ain't gonna let you kill Aunt T. And then Raymond done the sweetest thing. He'd taken off his old t-shirt and folded it up and put it under Mommy's head. Hell, Daddy was just kind of dazed. What Raymond done just sucked the fight right out of him. I was real proud of Raymond. Of course, we know nothing that we ever did was really ever going to change Daddy. Back in the 30s and 40s, men could get away with almost anything in the hellhole hollers of East Tennessee where I grew up. Neighbors didn't interfere in family business, and the law didn't either. I know that I had to do something about our situation. Somebody had to. Daddy's brother Hal knows what was going on. He got me my first gun, a .38 revolver. I ain't never been with a gun near me since. I ain't been shy about using it neither. Well, Uncle Hal took me to a nearby hillside and taught me how to shoot. And then he told me to take it home and hide it real good. And don't bring it out unless Daddy was trying to kill Mommy or one of us kids. You see, Daddy's blood brother knew what he was capable of doing. So I took it and hid it under my bed. And I didn't tell nobody but my sister Lurie. And I made her promise not to tell nobody. But it scared her through and through. What if Daddy finds out? She wondered, her eyes getting big as saucers. If he does, I said, it'll be too late. Seeing that gun will be the last thing he ever sees. Daddy's mama, we called her Grandmaw Lamb, she was the onlyest one who could ever do anything with Daddy. Do anything with him. But folks thought she was meaner than shit. But she really liked my mama. And it bothered her the way Daddy treated her. So she tried to do things to cheer Mommy up. Once, she bought her this beautiful coffee pot. It was blue and gray enamel. And Mommy was real proud of it because she didn't get many new things. The next day, Mommy made Daddy some coffee with it. She handed him a cup and took a sip, and he made a bad face. He said, "This coffee tastes like piss." Then he went to the backyard and threw it away. Then he come back and picked up that coffee pot and said, "This coffee pot ain't worth shit." He took it out to the backyard and started stomping on it till it was all bent out of shape. And then he picked it up and threw it as hard as he could to a nearby briar patch. Well, sometime later, Grandmaw Lamb came to visit. She said, "Sorry, T, where's that percolator I give you?" Mommy had to tell her what Daddy done. Grandma jumped out of that chair like a scalded cat. "Where is it?" Mommy pointed down to the briar patch where Daddy was sitting. Grandma went out in the yard and picked up a big stick. She shook it at him. "Sam, you get your sorry ass down that hill, and don't you come back without that coffee pot." Daddy knew better than to mess with Grandma. He headed off down that hill so fast he was almost a blur. Us kids was watching him trying to figure out how he was going to get that coffee pot without getting himself all scratched up. Watching him do that was the most fun we ever had. But Daddy was too far away to see us dancing and giggling. When Daddy come up the hill, he was sweating and grumbling. He put the coffee pot back on the porch. Grandma wasn't satisfied. She raised her stick and said, "Now, straighten it out." Daddy pushed and pulled in that pot, but he couldn't get it straight. He went over, got himself a piece of stove wood off the pile, come back and started hitting on it. Little flakes of enamel were flying in every direction. Every time he tried to stop, Grandma would lift her stick again. I don't know how he done it, but he finally got it satisfied to Grandma's satisfaction. Oh, well, I can't tell you how many times me and my brothers and sisters played out that scene. I always played Grandma. Of course, we done it when Daddy weren't around. Me and Mommy tried our best to take care of that family. I was with her all the time, in the woods or in the fields. I was always on the lookout for some way to make money. Some folks thought I was a money-loving fool. I didn't love money. I just know you had to have it to survive. The first time I remember ever having any money I could claim as my own, I was 5-year-old. And I remember it clear as if it was yesterday. Well, we didn't have no running water in the house, so I had to take up 2 lard buckets and go and get it from my landlord's spring. And I go by this place where some men was using dynamite to crush stone to build a road. I know what it meant when they said, "Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole!" And I'd run and hide behind the spring house so I wouldn't get hit by them flying rocks when the blast went off. One day, I was coming by with my lard buckets, and one of the men seen me and asked me if he could have some water. I held out a bucket to him, and he took several long drinks. And then he said, "Much obliged, honey." And he reached in his pocket and took out something and gave it to me. It was the prettiest thing I ever seen. It was a bright, shiny coin that had a picture of a woman on it. It looked like she had wings growing out of her ears. I didn't even say thank you. I was so surprised. I run home and told Mommy I have a brand new penny. And she said it was a dime, worth 10 pennies. Oh, in my mind, that shiny coin was one of the most beautiful things I ever seen. And that man that gave it to me, I remember him well too. He made me see that there was good people in the world, and some of them were even men. Money was scarce. Me and Mommy worked hard every day. Tell the truth, I don't think Daddy ever brought home a red cent. When I was 12, I was skinny bones. I didn't weigh more than 8 pounds soaking wet, but I wasn't afraid of hard work. By then, I could till a hillside field, cut new ground with 2 mules and a turning plow. My arms weren't really long enough to reach him unless I really, really stretched, so I held on to the bar in between them. I was still a kid when I convinced Mommy that me and her would build us a house. It was just too darn crowded in that little shack we rented from Boyd Sneed. His family had a lot of property because they bought it up real cheap when it was distressed land. And I figured maybe Boyd would sell us a piece of land and we could pay it off by working for him in the fields, the way we've done to pay our rent. Mommy was just shocked out of her gourd that I would even consider it. She said, "But we know we got no money and nothing to build with." But I said, "Mommy, we got all these woods around us. And besides, we got a sawmill across the road, and maybe they give us some of them slabs that they're left over when they're trimming the logs." Mommy just shook her head and said, "Fireball, I don't know where you get these ideas, but I believe if you think we can do it, then we can." Not to brag on myself, but I did have a quick mind, and when it comes to building things, I could see how things went together. Plus, I didn't give up easy neither. First of all, Boyd agreed to let us buy the land and let us work it off by paying work in the fields. First I had to go I went over to Jenny's wood for the sawmill, and that foreman, he told me we could have them slabs. He was going to burn them anyway. At first, I had to walk up close to where the sawyer was cutting them slabs, but pretty soon, he started stacking them by the road so I could get them easier. Some more good men. Then, we went to the woods, and we had to cut down 4 long corner posts, and then drag them back to where we was building the house. It weren't easy, but we did it. And then, we started having driving pegs to hold them posts upright. Then we started framing it in with a good sturdy floor and ceiling, and then started nailing on them slabs to the outside walls. Them men over at the sawmill sure seemed to like us. Me and Mommy noticed they kept watching us. Maybe they respected how hard we were working. When it come time to build the inside walls, he was going to have to find somewhere to get that wood. It was like magic. That foreman come over and he said they was going to start saving any mis-sawed wood for us. Oh, the thrill that run through me, it was like electricity. And he done what he said. That wood started piling up so fast, I figured they was miscutting on purpose. Well, pretty soon we finished our house. It was only 2 rooms, and that was still kind of tight for 9 kids still at home. But so we went and got us an old school bus and parked in the yards for extra sleeping space when the weather permitted. We built an outside toilet and got our water from the creek. Later on, we dug us a well to draw water from. Maybe a few years before we could run the house for electricity, but with the standards we was used to, it was just fine. At this time, I was growing up and out. My sister started teasing me. Hazel's getting titties. The boys are sure going to be hanging around now. I understood enough to know why they said that. One day I was riding a mule over to work for a fellow named Otis. And I was getting off the mule, and that son of a bitch rubbed on my little boobies. I had heard enough woman talk to know what that could lead to. I believed if I didn't stop it right then and there, I might be raped. I was wearing high-soled, hard-soled boots, and I hauled off and I kicked him between the legs as hard as I could. Ooh, his eyes bugged out and doubled over and stopped breathing. Otis! Don't you die on me, you son of a bitch! He was gasping for breath, but he managed to say he was going to tell my mama what I'd done. I answered back real quick, while you're at it, why don't you tell your wife what you're trying to do to me? I advise you to shut up or I'll kick you again. He got real quiet. His breathing started getting regular again. I knowed I'd won that fight. I heard he told some fellas that they didn't want to mess with Fireball. I like that. Oh, I guess I've used that tactic on 9 men, including one preacher. And to this day, nary one of them has been able to force themselves on me. In every case, the sons of bitches just left their guard down. They push you back, use one hand to pull your britches down, the other to get their tallywhacker out. And by that time, they're so out of it that they don't know where they are. And that's when I make my move. When my big old broke head hit those balls, it knocked them clean out. And to this day, you won't see me wearing any flip-flops or skimpy flats. I guess you folks notice I cuss a little. Mommy didn't like it. She said swearing was right up there with lying and stealing in her book. Well, she used to say, don't never get yourself into a fix where you have to steal. And don't never do nothing so bad you have to lie about it. And I can honestly say I've tried to follow her rules. To this day, I've never stolen nothing from nobody. And though I've had to get creative to keep from outright lying, I've generally been honest. But cussing is a losing battle for me. Except for one thing. You will never see me taking the name of the Lord in vain. Not that I'm so religious and all, but I do believe in prayer when needed. Many's the time I prayed to the man upstairs that my daddy wouldn't kill my mama. And since she never died, no matter how hard he beat on her, I figure God is due the credit. The happiest day of my life was when my dad and mommy divorced my daddy. He'd been shacking up with this woman for years. But for some reason, he decided he wanted to make it legal. Of course, he couldn't get a divorce himself. There weren't no such thing as no-fault divorce in them days. Of course, Mommy had plenty of grounds. And I guess she was glad to be rid of him. And we all thought, oh, it'd be good to have him out of our lives for good. But he had to come back one more time. But this time, I was ready for him. I was on the porch when he came out of his car and rolled down the window hollering, "Where's your mama at?" I said, I told him, "You sawed-off son of a bitch. You bother my mama one more time, I'll kick the shit out of you." He sneered and said, "You ain't gonna do nothing. You're too stupid." I said, "I ain't so stupid as to beat on a woman and a bunch of kids." He said, "Just go get her." His teeth was clenched. I stood stock still and I told him I wasn't gonna do nothing. He said, "You damn pumped up little ass. You think you're tough, don't you?" I said, "Well, you couldn't pull a greasy string out of a cat's ass. And if you take one more step towards this house, I'll show you how tough I am." I was boiling like a cabbage now. Some folks say I was fighting a circle saw with it or running. And I guess I've gotten to that point by now. I balled up my fist and I hated toward him. I could see he didn't want to tangle with me. He stopped, sneered some more, got in his truck, rolled down the window, said, "Tell your mama I'll be back." I didn't say nothing. I just threw my middle finger in his direction and walked real slow. I never seen him again. I did go to his funeral, just to make sure they put the right bastard in that box. There was a lot of change after my daddy and Mommy divorced. And the most important one to me was I got to go to school. Daddy wouldn't let me. He said girls didn't need no education to dye her babies and feed hogs. He wouldn't let the boys go neither. Well, I was 14 when I started first grade. I could already read and write some. My Uncle Hal would teach me the ABCs, and I teach myself how to read by looking at pictures in the Sears Roebuck catalog. My first grade teacher was Miss Mary Smith. She was a real sweet lady. She always told me I'd be a real smart lady when I growed up. I sure hope I proved her right. She sure did teach me a lot. I always said I was never going to get married. But I did. When I was 15, I got married. And that brought in a whole new phase to my life. I had to drop out of school, of course. But that don't mean I give up on education. The fact is that even though I only finished first grade, I don't think I ever give up on learning. The fact is, 9 Not a day goes by I didn't learn something new. And I hope that don't never change. My first husband was my first cousin. His name was Herschel Ricker, but folks called him Hut. He's a good-looking old boy with dark hair and dark skin. Oh, here, this is a picture of him and me on our wedding day. I know some folks think it's a little strange for a 15-year-old girl to get married, but when I come along, they weren't strange at all. Fact is, there was lots of girls getting married at 12 or 13. In poor families like mine, it was kind of expected for you to marry and move out early. Hut was 20-year-old, and he had a steady job cutting timber. We moved in with his daddy. Even though he wasn't my uncle, for some reason I called him Poppy. I love Poppy, and he loved me. His wife had died in childbirth, and he never remarried. Well, it weren't long before I got pregnant. But I kept on plowing until I could hardly hook the gallows on my overalls. But when I went into labor, they called for Grandmaw Lamb. She come quick and delivered our baby girl. We named her Polly Jean. Oh, and she was the sweetest thing. She was the prettiest baby I ever seen. She was so sweet. But she wasn't a year old when she come down with meningitis. Of course, I didn't know what that was, but she had been such a happy baby. But her smile stopped, and she just didn't look right. I tried to get her to nurse, but she wouldn't take the nipple, and then she started vomiting, and her little arms and legs started jerking. I asked Poppy what I should do, and he said I would put her in the car and take her over to Mommy's. So I laid Polly Jean in the seat beside me and took off to Mommy's house. Please, dear God, I was praying as hard as I could. Please let her be okay. Don't let nothing be wrong with her. When I got there, Mommy was already on the front porch. She said, "Is something the matter?" And she run to the car. I said, "It's Polly Jean. She don't look right." Mommy got in the car and she took one look at Polly Jean and said, "We need to get this baby to Dr. Ellison." I got in the car and we started off to the doctor's office as fast as I could, praying as hard as I could. When we got there, I'd taken Polly Jean from Mommy and I'd run to the doctor's office, and run past everybody in the waiting room and didn't stop till I got to the doctor. Dr. Ellison said, "What's wrong with her?" And he pointed to the examination table. I laid Polly Jean down and he shook his head and said, "That baby's got meningitis. Ain't nothing I can do for her. She'll be dead in 15 minutes. And then he walked off like nothing wasn't bothering at all. I was dazed and alone and confused. I went and picked up Polly Jean and held her close to my breast. I went back in the waiting room and I could tell Mommy could see I was all tore up. And she come to me taking Polly Jean and went to the car. Mommy didn't say nothing, but I could tell she knowed just by looking at me and looking at Polly Jean. By the time we got home, Polly Jean was gone. I don't remember much what happened the next few days. Hut was beside me. His eyes was red from crying. Especially when we went to see Polly Jean in her little pine box. Grandmaw Lamb had prepared many a baby for burial. And she put Polly Jean in a pretty little pink dress. She looked like a doll. We buried her at the Walnut Grove Cemetery. It was the saddest day of my life. After that, for a while I didn't think I wanted to have no more babies. But after a while I got pregnant again. And me and Hut thought maybe it would ease our sadness some. Me and Hut got along for a while, okay, but as time rocked along, we began to sour on each other. Hut and one of his buddies loved to drink moonshine and go to honky-tonks. From there, I was quick to find out, they pick up trash and women. And one night, like a dope, I let him borrow my little blue convertible that I bought and paid for myself. I was asleep in bed in the middle of the night, and I heard a car come up in the yard. I got up and went to the window to look out, and I could make it Hut and his buddy, and then I could see there was two women with sleep with the whores or he could sleep on the floor. I didn't give a shit. Well, I did let her back in after a few days. But when he come home, I told him he wasn't never going to use my car again to go riding around with no trashy women. I raised him to ruckus. He slapped me across the face. I said, "You son of a bitch! You hit me again like that, I'll kill you. And for your information, as soon as I had this baby, I'm leaving you." He said, "Oh, shut up, Hazel. You ain't going nowhere." I said, "You just watch me. And if you know what side your bread's buttered on, you keep your distance from me till I've had this baby. And then I'll keep mine." I kept getting bigger and bigger. I had an easy time birthing Polly Jean, but I thought this would be easy too, but I was wrong about that. When I went into labor, they called her Grandmaw Lamb. But we waited all day and nothing happened. In the afternoon of the second day, they still ain't coming, and Grandma lifted my nightgown to see what was going on, and she said the baby was coming out the wrong way. It was coming out feet first. And she tried to move it by pressing on my belly, but it weren't room to move it. By the third day, I passed out. About that time, Mommy come by, and she said that I ought to go to the hospital in Cleveland. Well, the doctor there cut me open and got the baby out. When I finally woke up, they showed me this big old youngin'. It was my baby boy. I said, "No, that ain't my baby. I was expecting a pretty little girl baby like Polly Jean." And Mommy said, "No, honey, your first baby was a girl, but this time you had a 10-pound baby boy." They had him in this tiny little pink girl dress. It was way too small for him. It looked like 5 of them 10 pounds was around his neck. I had never seen such a fat baby in my life. I told him, "That ain't my baby. You're trying to give me one somebody else don't want." Well, it took a lot of explaining, and the drugs wearing off to make me realize it was my baby. And that I could love that fat little booger. I named him Dallas Marshall Ricker. And when I started to go home 10 days later, I was real proud of him. He was a good baby. And I was happy to be a mama again. I went to stay with Mommy while I recovered. I didn't intend to ever stay with Hut again. I asked Poppy if I could stay there, and he said he'd be glad to have me, and he'd make sure that Hut didn't bother me none. Poppy was a real gentleman. Too bad his son wasn't. Sometime after that, I divorced Hut, and he moved off to Ohio looking for work. He got married again. I hope he was a better husband to his second wife, Celine, than he was to me. Sometime later, many years later, when Hut died, they brought him back to Decatur to be buried. He wanted to be laid alongside Polly Jean. I cried a little when I heard that. I went to Hut's funeral, and I sat in a pew in the back, and even though I hadn't seen him in who knows how many years, I felt a little sad. Except for my daddy and one of my husbands. I ain't never been glad to hear nobody die. After I divorced Hut, my responsibilities multiplied. I had to look after me and Dallas almost all by myself. I worked all kind of jobs, but mostly for Mr. Watson. He run a grocery store there in Decatur. I think he appreciated how hard I worked. I gathered produce in his fields, and he'd sell it in the stores. And since I had a car, he would have me run lots of errands. One day he came up to me and said, "Little fireball, there's something going on over at Oak Ridge, and I think you ought to be part of it. I can get you a job in a restaurant up there washing dishes." He was talking about a place about 70 miles up the road where the government was building a bomb. There was lots of people in town around here who was getting good paying jobs up there. And Mr. Watson, he run a bus up there and back every day. I learned later that Oak Ridge was known as the secret city. It wasn't on no map, even though 70,000 people worked there. They made people sign papers saying they wouldn't talk about what went on there, even to their families. I told Mr. Watson I didn't think Mommy would go up there. He said, "Your mama can stay right here, and I'll let you ride the bus for free." Well, I never turned down no work, and I figured washing dishes would be way easier than plowing or cutting cordwood. And it would be steady work and pay better. So I left Dallas with Mommy, and I caught Mr. Watson's bus to Oak Ridge. I started terrace restaurant. But it weren't long before my boss, Mr. Roscoe Stevens, come by and say, I ought not to be washing dishes, I ought to be a waitress. I told him, I'm a sawmill girl from the country. I might spill coffee on some stover's head. I didn't tell him that before I come there, I had never eaten in no restaurant before. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. And that was good enough for me to try it. And I found out I liked it, and people like me. Oh, well, I didn't have to ride the bus for long before my boss pulled some strings and got me a room at the Oak Ridge Girls' Dormitory. Oh, I was excited about that, because that saved me that long drive from Decatur. Oh, well, I left Dallas with Mommy during the week, and I come home on the weekends. I take them places and take them places. Well, I got to give Mommy money now, and that made me feel real good. I bought me a dependable car. I met a lot of nice ladies in the dormitory. There weren't no men in the dorm, but they was everywhere else. Us women almost had to have a police escort to get from one place to another. I weren't looking for no boyfriend, but there was this one man that kept coming in the restaurant and kept flirting with me. His name was Amos Gibbs, and he drove a bus for the government. He kept asking me to go out with him, but I weren't interested. He was a real looker. I mean, he had red hair, blue eyes, but I weren't interested. But we did become friends. Amos had 4 kids, 1 boy and 3 girls. And they lived down in Ringo, Georgia with his mama. His wife had died, birthing their 4th child. One day, a weekend, Amos asked me to go down there with him. And I thought, I've only been to Decatur and Oak Ridge. It might be nice to see someplace different. When we got there, Amos's mama and his 4 kids was on the front porch. She was real friendly, but I could tell right away she weren't well. Not well at all. There was no way she could take care of them 4 kids. After we'd been down there a few times, one day me and Miss Gibbs was alone together, and she come right out and asked me, wouldn't I marry Amos? I just dropped my teeth. She said, Hazel, you know these youngins need some mama. I've seen how well y'all get on together and how they've taken to you. And you know my health ain't good, Hazel. I'm getting more bedridden every day. Well, I told her, I could sure see these kids need a mama, but I wasn't ready to get married again. And besides, taking on 4 kids is a big responsibility, especially when I'm just 18 myself. But on the ride home, I made up my mind I was going to have to marry Amos. Even though he was 17 years older than me and I didn't love him. He'd asked me several times to marry him, but he was dead set against taking those kids, which weren't going to cut it with me. But finally, he turned around. He said, okay, well, you take the kids. So I agreed to marry him. But I know deep down inside that I was really marrying them children. We got married at the courthouse in Ringo, Georgia, because they didn't have no 3-day waiting period like they done in Oak Ridge. And Amos, he had rented a house out there on the Taylor Road in the Barlow community, which was near Oak Ridge. So I moved out of the dormitory and in with Amos. It weren't long before I got pregnant again. And on July 19th, 1952, I gave birth to a boy. He was a beautiful little blue-eyed, blonde-headed angel. We named him Cecil Farrell Gibbs, but we called him Butch. Well, because we left him with a babysitter once, and we clean forgot to tell her his name, and she started calling him Butch, so we called him Butch too. A few years later, we added a sweet little girl to our family. We named her Neomi. I'll never forget wrapping her up in a pink blanket and taking her home from the Oak Ridge Hospital through 6 inches of snow. That was a lot where we come from. Butch was about 3-year-old then and kind of spoiled, I guess. He liked being the baby, and he weren't too fond of his baby sister. Whenever I'd be nursing her, he'd come up and rub up against me and suck his thumb, or one day I seen him pushing against her. I said, to be careful, he might hurt her. He said, I'm gonna throw that baby into the yard. I said, Butch, don't you love your baby sister? Do you wish it were a boy? He said, a boy'd be better than a darn girl. And that gave me an idea. I decided to make up a song to sing to Butch. I think it'd make him feel special to have a song taking his side of things. Later on, I sung it to Neomi too. Went like this. Through a garden creeping, a little boy come peeping, gaily peeping through a golden curl, and a little bundle, a funny little bundle. It was a tiny baby girl. It came to town that morning as the day was dawning. Its mama thought it'd fill his heart with joy, but he shook his little head and to his mama said, "Gee, I wish that you had bought a boy. Can't you take it back and trade it for another? I don't want no baby sister, can't you see? I'd rather have a little baby brother to play a game of ball with me. Oh, it ain't no fun to play with dolls and such things. A girl you know could never fix a toy. I'll tell you what to do. If it's all the same with you, we'll take it back and change it for a boy." Mama, ain't it awful funny? Cost a lot of money. Won't it be an awful lot of care? It ain't a good one, Mother. You'll have to get another. Lord, can't you see it hasn't any hair? Don't its teeth come with it? Will its nose grow with it? Won't it be an awful lot of care? I'll tell you what to do. If it's all the same with you, we'll take it back and change it for a boy. I didn't get no more happy in my marriage to Amos. But he was still making good money driving the bus, and I still had my job at the restaurant. And for some women, that'd be all you could ask for. But not for me. I always had the hankering to try something new, like me in the restaurant business. Oh, I was always quick to catch on to things, and from waiting tables, I learned the ins and outs of the restaurant business. Weren't long, but I bought me a little piece of land and started laying the foundation for Hazel's Grill. Somebody asked Dallas once, why'd I call it Hazel's Grill? He said, "Because Mama can't spell restaurant." Some folks out there to go up. They said, "Oh, Bridget's sophisticated, and they wouldn't eat no country cooking like I do." About that time, I was growing lots of hogs, so I said, "Okay, fine. If they don't eat it, I'll take it home and feed it to the hogs. I know they eat it." But then they say it was wrong. I might be as country as turnip greens myself, not classy like my customers, but they couldn't get enough of my fresh eggs, homemade biscuits, sausage gravy. The pork and the beef we raised was also popular. I raised lots of fresh vegetables, and I had a patch of strawberries to make pies. They couldn't get enough of my food. Oh, but Amos weren't no help at all. He'd come in the restaurant sometimes and sit there to see if anybody was flirting with me. Once he threatened to shoot one of them, and I said, "Go ahead, go ahead." Then they'll come and arrest your ass, and I won't have to worry about you running off my customers. Me and Amos was always fiery. He was Irish, and I was part Cherokee, so it's no wonder that we fought all the time. I never did love him, so finally, in 1963, I divorced Amos. But I did wait until all my stepchildren had left the house. You know, I think I was married to him longer than any of my other husbands. Well, it looks like I got a little bit of daylight left. I guess I'll go walk around the place one more time and make sure things is all safe. I learned long ago, thieves is lazy. And if you put something really heavy up against the doors to your outbuildings and to your gates, they ain't gonna go to the trouble to move it to get in. Be back soon. Won't take long.
First.
Pardon me one more time, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Elmer always claimed I left him for a grease monkey. station in Oak Ridge. And it's true, I did start seeing him before I divorced Amos. But I told Amos I was leaving him before I even met Elmer. When me and Elmer decided to get married, I went ahead and sold my restaurant. And me and him moved to Columbus, Georgia. The hardest part about that was I decided it'd be best to leave Neomi in Oak Ridge with Amos. Me and him had worked out joint custody of her and Butch. They stayed with him 1 year and me the next. But I wasn't sure I was going to be in a stable situation. And I didn't want the kids, I didn't want them being drugged from place to place and getting behind in school. So I told Amos he could keep on living in the house that I owned and I built and take care of Neomi. My sister Geraldine lived nearby, and I know she'd keep an eye on her. Plus, Neomi loved her daddy. I told her once, only you and God could love that man. And I'm not so sure about God. But I have to admit, he always took good care of Neomi. Well, Elmer was real good to me and my youngins. Once, he'd taken us all on a trip to Florida. I'd never been, stayed in a motel, and I had never did that before. I seen oranges growing on trees, and that ocean, would just take my breath away. We went to Silver Springs and rode in one of them glass-bottom boats, and I seen all the pretty fishes swimming around. The guide said that the groups of fishes was called schools, and I joked that some of them fishes probably had more education than I did. But things weren't always good with me and Elmer. I don't know what we fought about, but fight we did. He had a heart attack, and Neomi, she really liked him, and she was afraid I'd give him another. I'm not sure why we broke up, but I know it was my fault. He must have done some shit to me at some point, but I can't remember what. But like I tell all my husbands, I didn't give no second chances. My fourth husband was named Grady Truitt. He come and went pretty fast, so there's not much to tell about him. I asked Neomi a few years ago to make me a list of all my husbands, because some of them just slipped my mind. I met my next husband in a Jubilee. His name was Bill Williams, and he was Army Lieutenant Colonel. He was tall, well-built, and looked real handsome in his uniform. He lived all over the world. He was more educated than most of the men I had went out with. I was surprised he took a shine to a country girl, but he was crazy about me. He wrote me love letters all the time, and I just couldn't resist him. So I agreed to marry him. I didn't know nothing about the military life. But I figured out pretty quick I weren't cut out to be no officer's wife. I didn't like them highfalutin parties we had to go to. I didn't like them snobby officers' wives neither. I sure couldn't stomach their champagne and them little sandwiches they loved to eat. I hear people say that I had a bite for lunch and a bite for supper. Well, for the first time in my life, I actually know what they was talking about. But what I really wanted to do was get me a job. I was bored silly. But the colonel didn't want me to go to work. Well, I had never had to ask nobody for money before, and that didn't sit well with me. But I guess because he was an officer and he was paying the bills, he figured he could boss me around. Well, finally I told him, becoming a military colonel didn't make you God. You don't own me, and I'm not going to jump every time you wiggle your little finger. I know things couldn't go on like this. So I was real happy when the colonel decided to retire. I missed Mommy in Meigs County a whole lot. So I persuaded him to move back to where I grew up. He got on at Meigs County as deputy sheriff. But just being out of the military didn't mean he stopped giving orders. And I knew the situation weren't gonna last. It weren't too long before I got interested in another man in Decatur. His name was Bill Wilkinson. So I decided it was time to divorce the colonel. When we went to court, Judge Bill McKenzie was presiding, and he asked me what Bill did. The colonel did, and I said, well, he washes the clothes, he cleans the house, and he cooks the meals. The judge looked kind of puzzled and said, And you want to divorce him? You know you won't find another man to do all that. I said, I reckon I won't, but I still want a divorce. He made me as handy as a pocket on a shirt, but it torques my jaw when he tries to make me ladylike. So, I divorced one Bill in the morning and married another one in the afternoon. Bill Wilkinson could not have been more different than Bill Williams. He was a redneck clod kicker from Decatur. And I thought he'd be a good one because he was a Sunday school superintendent. He was at that Baptist church every time the doors flew open. But our marriage was pretty rocky from the start. One day I got so mad at him, I went and got my rifle. And the only thing that saved him was I couldn't find no bullets. But I did go out and I busted the windows out of his truck with the butt of my rifle with him in it. He said he wasn't going to live with no crazy woman, and he moved out. But he come back, and things didn't get no better. One day we was fighting about something, and he grabbed onto my thumb and pulled it back real hard till it hurt. I tried to shake him loose, but he held on tight. He was a lot bigger than me, but somehow I managed to drag him through the house into the kitchen, and I grabbed up an RC Cola bottle, and I tried to hit him with it, but I missed it, and I hit the counter instead, and it broke. He was laughing at me, but the smile went off his face when I cut him 2 new eyebrows with an RC bottle. He run to the phone and called the police, but nobody showed up. After that, Bill quieted down. And then I found out I was pregnant. But Bill told me to get shed of it, which I didn't believe in. And I told him I'd get a job and I'd take care of the baby myself, which I did. I went to work at a sweatshop, Decatur Garment Manufacturing, making army overcoats. Oh, I was getting bigger and bigger. And I went to the hospital for a checkup at 6 months along. I was 36-year-old and I never had no pap smear, so I didn't expect what they found. I had cancer of the womb. And the doctor, he was real sympathetic. He said, I really hate to tell you this, Miss Hazel, but your cancer is far too advanced to let that baby go full term. If we don't take it, you're going to die. Well, I sure didn't want to lose that baby, but I didn't think I had no other choice. He were a boy, and he lived 2 hours. I named him David Emmanuel. I was so sick I couldn't go to the funeral. That made me real sad. Somebody took this picture of little David Emmanuel in his little casket and gave it to me. I used to cry every time I looked at this. At this time, I was suffering both in body and heart. And Bill, he wouldn't take me to the cancer treatments in Chattanooga. Mommy got one of my uncles to take us. Back then, they treated cancer of the womb by putting cobalt inside of you. It made me awful sick and weak. And I spent most of my time laying in bed. One day, Bill come in and he started choking me. He said, "You good for nothing, bitch. Laying in bed all the time. I told you to get rid of that baby. You might not be in this shape if you listened to me." I was so weak, I couldn't fight back. But with my last breath, I managed to say, "Please don't let me die. It'll break my mama's heart." When he finished choking me and was satisfied I was dead, he shut up the house real tight and left me with no sign of life in me. Mommy came to check on me and she couldn't get in. She hollered, "Fireball, are you in there?" I tried to answer, but no sound would come out. Mommy got scared and she busted in a window. She said she found me dead. No doubt about it. But she washed my face and prayed over me till I come back to life. When I begun to stir, she said it made her so happy. And she held me in her arms and let her tears flow over me. I was so weak, I didn't really know what was going on. You folks probably wonder why Bill didn't go to prison for attempted murder. We never called the police. That's not how our people done things. I did divorce Bill, of course. And I went to work back at the coat factory. About 8 years later, when I was with another husband, we was out fishing, and over by Crossbow Mountain, and he was listening to a broadcast out of Meigs County. The announcer came on saying, "And now in local news, Bill Wilkinson died in Decatur today." Thank you, God! That's all I had to say. Oh, well, after all I went through with Bill Wilkinson, I weren't too crazy about the idea of getting married again. I had a few boyfriends, but nobody I thought about marrying. But I did fall in love again in the most unexpected way. I had got a job at a furniture manufacturing place, and my job was upholstery. And I was managing a crew when a young, good-looking fella named James Trueblood come to work there. Me and him hit it off real good right from the start. We both loved music, and in fact, singing and playing guitar was what brought us together. We was just friends. I was a lot older than him, and I kept trying to fix him up with girls his age, but they weren't interested. In fact, he told me, he said, "Hazel, if I can't have you, I don't want nobody." I said, "Honey, I'm old enough to be your mama." He said, "You're old enough to be my wife, and I'd be proud to have you. I'll get down on my knee if I have to." I said, "Jane, be sensible." He said, "Hazel, if I don't marry you, I'll die single." That's when I realized Jane was crazy about me. He told me he'd be good to me, and he'd never look at another woman. He said, "I'm like here on a biscuit, Hazel. I'm here to stay." So we married. Oh, and James said it was the happiest day of his life. Now, James was pretty smart, but he'd never gone to school. He couldn't write. So I taught him. And we started out by writing stuff like the names of states and things. But he said he was proudest when he could finally write, "Hazel, I love you." Me and James opened an antique business in Decatur, and he was going real good. I don't think I was ever happier in my life. Yeah, but then we found out James had testicular cancer. It was a real bad case. James got the radiation treatments, and he was able to come home, but he got bad again and had to go back, and this time they couldn't stop the cancer. As he was dying, my heart was breaking. James weren't but 28-year-old when he died on May 12th, 1973. We buried him at Walnut Grove Cemetery. When he died, he had 10 pictures of me in his wallet. I think if he lived, he would have been my last husband. You know, I did know how to love a man. I was so tore up about losing James. I decided to move back to Georgia to be near Neomi. We married a fellow named Alan. And there, I met Alan's uncle, E.V. Watson, who was like a daddy to Alan. Before I got turned around good, I was getting married to E.V. But E.V. weren't ready to be done with his ex-wife, Georgie. She lived up in Anderson County, Tennessee. Well, one day I come home and found a note on the bed saying, "Gone streaking to Tennessee." He thought he was joking, but I didn't think it was funny. And I had it with him. But then, we found out what happened. When he went up to Georgie's house, she shot him through the front door. Killed him, deader than a doornail. She said he'd been beating on her when they was married, and she was afraid he'd do it again. Well, if that were true, I didn't blame her one bit for what she'd done, and I'm glad she didn't go to jail for it. And she saved me from getting another divorce. After that, I moved back to Oak Ridge and got me a job waiting tables at Shoney's. For long, I was the manager on the night shift. Naomi come back too and shot a job at Shoney's on the day shift. She tried her best to make a go of her marriage to Alan, but he weren't around much. She got pregnant, but she lost the baby. She got pregnant again and gave birth to her son, Jason, who was born October 25th, 1975. And I was there for the birth, and so was Alan, but he left, and he didn't see his son for 3 months. Truth is, whenever he was at home, he was beating on Neomi. Honest truth, she was scared to him. It took her 5 years to give up the courage to leave him. But on the morning of March 17th, 1980, she left for work with her purse and the clothes on her back, and she never went back to that house again. When Neomi was 25, she heard about pipe fitting jobs at the Oak Ridge K-25 plant. She didn't even know what a pipe fitter was. But she applied for an apprenticeship to learn pipe fitting. They took just 25 out of over 200 who applied, and Neomi was one of them. She had to work 40 hours a week and go to school in Knoxville for 4 hours, 2 nights a week. Neomi never thought much about doing men's work. I guess because she's seen me doing it all my life. Listen to this. She became the second woman's apprentice of the Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 102 in Knoxville. The other woman quit, and so Neomi was the only woman who finished that course. I was so proud of her, and I know she'd sure do real good. As for me, I kept on trying new things to make a living. I had run to a poster at the furniture manufacturing place I worked at. So I decided to open up a business to do that in Oak Ridge. I found me a business, a building for it out on Warehouse Road, and I bought me some good heavy equipment. And before long, I had a steady stream of customers. And about that time, I started doing something else that really changed the course of my life. Me and my sister Geraldine, she still lived nearby, we'd go out every Saturday morning to yard sales and flea markets. Pretty soon, I was selling stuff at the flea markets myself. I'd make deals to clean out some house when some old person died or they went to a rest home. Almost always, the children didn't want nothing but to get rid of everything as quick as possible. All they was interested in was the money they'd get out of it. Well, sometimes when I'm going through all this stuff, I'll come across some trinket I like and I'll keep it for myself. Like, I have a skull and crossbones on a chain that I dangle from my rearview mirror of my truck. And one time I found this pretty little leaf on a chain, and I put it up there with the skull. I didn't know what kind of leaf it was, but until some woman asked me, why did I have that marijuana leaf up there with the skull and crossbones? I had to think real quick and said, one was to show you what you look like if you smoked the other one. All work and no play for me. I started going out almost every night to sing and play guitar and dance. My favorite place to go was the Chalkville Music Barn out on Clinton Highway. It was famous because Cass Walker broadcast a TV show from there. Before that, he had a very popular radio program called the Cass Walker Farm and Home Show. Oh, did you know? That's how Dolly Parton got her start. When I first started going to Clarkville, there was a banjo player named David West who owned it. Me and him, he asked me to sing quite a bit, and sometimes me and him sung together. They called us Settin' Bull and Squattin' Heifer. No joke. But me and David become like brother and sister. Eventually, he become rich as 10 foot of a bull. But he stayed simple as a footlog. Let's see. I met a lot of nice men at the Jubilees. It seemed like they all wanted to sing and dance and seemed to dance with me. My favorite dance partner was named Floyd Downs Jr. He would soon become husband number 9. Floyd was bald and pretty bad, but he was still good looking. I guess we must have got along because the marriage lasted 3 years, which was a long time. We never fought, but for me, when the marriage is over, it's over. I don't think much about looking back. When we broke up, I had like 2 husbands there for a little bit. Floyd was supposed to get the divorce, but I went ahead and got married before he got around to filing. He said he couldn't bring himself to divorce me. He said, and I said, well, honey, I know you're slow as steam off cold water, but you got to do it quick because I don't want to go to jail. So we put a rush on it. I didn't have to do no time. Sometimes it feels like I'm playing hopscotch. I hop over one person and on to another. The next one was John Bryant. He worked at a plant here in Oak Ridge, and I divorced him because he called me a bitch. The year 1984 started out real hard. Mommy died of cancer on my birthday, January 3rd. I cut out her funeral notice and framed it. I reread it every once in a while. And it wasn't long after that we lost Butch. He'd been claiming a stomach ache and vomited for 3 days before we rushed him to the emergency room. But he died as soon as we got there. And they couldn't tell us why he died. We think it was something with his pancreas. It just about broke my heart to lose another child. I know we weren't like the others who died as babies, but your children is supposed to outlive you, not the other way around. But life has a way of going on, and you just can't give up. I still perform places and sing and dance, and I met my next husband at the picking parlor where I perform sometimes. His name was Bill Lindsey. And we decided to get married at the Jubilee where we met. We even had a woman preacher to marry us. Her name was Miss Ida Mae Dalton. I don't remember much about how she looked, but she had the brightest pink lipstick I ever seen. Ain't it funny the things you remember about folks? Well, Bill was already retired when we married, and he had a place out on the lake at the Tri-County Sportsman's Club. We spent a lot of time out there, either sitting on the sun porch or fishing for bluegill and crappie. I still kept my home in Oak Ridge, but I done sold all my hogs and was just really getting into flea market. Bill had never did none of that, but he took to it like ants on a meat skin. In fact, he'd taken his little camping trailer down to Mexico and bought a whole lot of silver and turquoise jewelry, brought it back, and he rented a booth next to mine at the flea market and made good money off of it. Now Bill had 3 daughters who lived over in Charleston, South Carolina, and I went with Bill to visit them. Fact is, when I was with him, I felt like a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. One of his daughters was married to a doctor, and I think she believed her daddy was better than me. And I know they all wanted him back with his wife, his first wife, Judy, who lived in the same town. Well, the last time we went up there, Bill said he wanted to stay, when it come time to leave, he wanted to stay a little bit longer. I weren't so crazy about letting him stay up there by himself, but I'd give in. But I told him, if I'd heard he'd been doing anything with his ex-wife, Judy, he'd be all over by the shout with us. I did call him up there, and the maid said that he weren't there. Him and Miss Judy were at the lake skiing. Well, that was that. He come home, and he no sooner come into the front door, and I told him I know what he'd been doing with his ex-wife, and I was through with him. I started walking away, and he grabbed my arm and pulled me back to him. His face was red as a fire truck. He said, "Hazel, damn it, you don't never listen to no explanations." He looked angrier than I'd ever seen him before. And before I could say anything, he hit me across the cheek. And then he hit me in the mouth and busted my lip in 3 places. Now, I was the one who was angry. I went to get my gun. I wanted to shoot him between the eyes. But I thought about how hard it would be on my children if I went to jail. So I lowered the pistol. "Get out!" I screamed as loud as I could. And sure enough, he started toward the door. But he had to turn around. He just had to say one more thing. Well, I couldn't resist. I shot him just a little bit across the neck. I know I didn't do no serious damage, but I was proud he felt it. He said, "You're a crazy woman." He run out to his car, jumped in, and hit off with tires and squealing. It weren't long before the police showed up. And come up on the porch, and I let him in. And he looked me real hard up and down. He said, "I hear somebody got shot up here today, and from the look of your face, I think I know why there was a shooting." He looked me up and down again and said, "Oh, you are little, ain't you?" I said, "That's why I need a gun to take care of myself." He said, "Little girl, I ain't gonna put you in jail. You have every right to protect yourself. What I want you to know is I'm proud of you." He wanted me to sign a warrant for Bill's arrest, but I told him no, I wasn't going to sign no warrant. In fact, I told him I thought me and my 38 already settled things with Bill. Well, figured I was done with Bill. But before I got around to divorcing him, he come back. He told me he was so sorry for what he'd done to me and that he realized what he lost. He said he loved me, he feared me. He said, I want you to forgive me, take me back. I said, I told you we married. I didn't give no second chances. He said, I know, Hazel, but I'm a changed man. I'm sick and I need your help. I know it'll be hard to look after me, but I don't want to spend my last days with nobody but you. I didn't believe him at first, but finally I agreed. Bill had kidney cancer, and as it got worse, one of the hardest phases of my life was about to begin. I was able to take care of Bill at home for a long time, but after some point it got so bad, I had to check him into the hospital in Oak Ridge. He'd get better, and we'd come home, and he'd get bad again, and he had to go back. The last time, he stayed there for 93 days. And I only left his side one time. He asked me to go home and cook him a piece of steak the way he liked it. But the rest of the time, I was right there with him, by his side. I stayed by his bed day and night and done everything I could to make him comfortable. About that time, Bill's children decided he ought to go to the hospital in Charleston. But Bill wouldn't hear of it. He said he wanted to stay here in Oak Ridge and have me take care of him. Bill's condition kept getting worse and worse. He got down to 80 pounds, and they was feeding him through a tube in his stomach. Finally, the doctor come in and said they'd done all they could do, and it was just a matter of keeping him comfortable till the end. I know Bill wanted to go home, and I was making preparations to check him out. I'd set up a hospital bed, and I'd arranged for hospice to come by every day to check on him. For some reason, Bill's son-in-law, George, the doctor, he come over to Oak Ridge and talked to the doctor who was treating Bill. Little did I know he was planning to kidnap Bill from the hospital. Geraldine come to help me take Bill home, but she went out to smoke a cigarette, and the nurse asked me to go downstairs to sign something. I didn't want to leave Bill there by himself, but I went anyway. As I passed a window, I noticed an ambulance parked outside, but I didn't think nothing of it. When I got down there, the woman started shuffling papers around, and nothing she said made any sense. I smelled a rat, so I run back to Bill's room, but a woman policeman stopped me, wouldn't let me go in. And then they took me to a room across the hall where they was holding Geraldine. She said she seen them move Bill out in a gurney, and they wouldn't let her come get me. I started screaming and crying. I didn't know what they was doing with Bill. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. Turns out that ambulance I seen was waiting to take him to the airport to fly him back to Charleston. And Bill's family, they must have forged his name on a power of attorney because they went into our bank account and cleaned it out. And the doctor said he couldn't even sign his name. They went to where he'd worked and changed the beneficiary of his life insurance. They changed the title on his truck. They even had the nerve to go to our place on the lake and take anything they want. Bill had given me a painting on our first date. But they even taken that. I never seen Bill again. When he died, his daughter sent me a telegram saying he'd been buried with a flag-draped casket. Of course, I didn't know nothing about that. I didn't get to go to the funeral. And to this day, I still don't know where he's buried at. All I know is they brought him back to somewhere in middle Tennessee. But there was one thing that Bill's family couldn't get their hands on. Bill was being used as a test case in a class action lawsuit of Oak Ridge workers who had had health problems due to exposure to radiation. Bill was in one of the hottest spots in the X10 plant. That's why so many doctors, 21 in all, had come to check on him and run all them tests on him. Neomi, bless her heart, she done all the paperwork, and in the end, I got a $275,000 settlement. I don't think Bill's family know nothing about that. But if they did, they couldn't do nothing because he was given only to spouse. I didn't need all that money. So I gave each of my children $40,000. I gave each great-grandchild $1,000, each great-grandchild $500. I gave each grandchild a truck And later on down the road, I spent the rest to buy this flea market here. Well, I guess I done told you about all my 11 husbands now. After that, I decided I didn't need to get married no more. I did have a few boyfriends now and then, and a few wannabes on the road, but one friend of mine asked me, what was it going to be like to meet up with all them husbands in heaven? And I said, well, I'm still working on getting there myself. And if I make it, I'm not so sure some of them 11 husbands will be there. Another friend asked me, don't you want to make an even dozen? I said, honey, when it's time to quit, it's time to quit. But as I done got older, I done got to thinking, most people ain't been through so many changes as me. My life has sure been like a movie, like a horror movie. So, when I learned they was coming to make a moving picture over in Oliver Springs, which weren't far from where I lived, I decided to go over there and see if they'd make a movie of my life. The movie they was filming was called, from a book called Rocket Boys. It was about a teenager whose family was coal miners. But after he seen Sputnik fly over in 1957, all he wanted to do was shoot off rockets, not dig coal. It was snowing on a cold January day when I went to Oliver Springs High School where they was holding the auditions. Even in that weather, there was folks lined up around the block to see if they could be in the movie. Of course, I weren't there for no tryout, but I didn't see where else to be, so I got in line with everybody else. When I got to the head of the line, I told the fella I wanted to see somebody about making a movie of my life. Because I thought it'd be more interesting than most movies I ever saw. He was real polite. He said they was only registering people to be extras in the movie. And they didn't have no writer with them to start a new story. And then he asked me, did I want to be an extra in the movie? And I thought, well, I'm here. I ain't got nothing else to do right now. It might be fun. I asked him, what do I have to do? And he sent me over to this woman who said was a casting director. And she asked me lots of questions, wrote down some stuff. She took down my phone number and said, they call me if they need me. Well, I guess they decided pretty quick, because by the time I got home, there was a message on my recording machine asking me to report to Morganfield at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went down there like they said, and they put makeup on me and give me clothes they wanted me to wear. They told me I would be the wife of the coal miner, which was fine with me. I understood a coal miner's life, because my son Dallas worked in the mines. Plus, I'd been around hard-working people all my life, so I figured they realized I'd fit right in. I love telling people all about this, how I become a movie star. But it weren't glamorous at all. I didn't have no speaking lines or nothing like that. I did get to wail and cry when my husband died in a mine accident. Later, when my grandson Jason went to see it, he said he recognized me by the wailing before he ever seen it. One day, they was hooking up this machine to a fire truck to make it look like it was raining. And me and the man playing my husband, Roy, was in that scene. And when that water hit me, it sucked me through and through so much that my drawers fell down to my ankles. Roy boy bust out laughing, and so did I. But I weren't embarrassed. I just hiked them back up and held on tight for the rest of the shoot. The movie was originally titled Rocket Boys, but later they changed it to October Sky. The man who wrote it was named Homer Hickam. And I got my picture took with Homer, and they put it in the newspaper. But I most like the looks of the guy playing Homer. His name was Jake Gyllenhaal. Oh, you talk about good looking. Too bad I didn't get to view him up close. Well, I think the only thing I can explain to you is how I come to have my flea market here and how I built up the business. My sister Geraldine, I was closer to her than any of my other sisters. We'd often go down to Meigs County to visit Mommy before she died. And we'd take off early in the morning, and we'd stop at this place to eat our breakfast. It was nice and flat. There used to be a restaurant and a gas station, but now it's just a concrete slab, a telephone pole, and a post with a cast iron bell on it. Well, we'd lean against the car and eat our sausage biscuits and drink coffee from a thermos and take in the pretty view. One morning we was resting there, and I told Geraldine, this would make a good place for a flea market. I told her, I'm going to buy this place. She laughed and said, you dummy. Oh, but poor Geraldine died before I ever got around to find out who owned the place. But when I did, I made arrangements to buy it. When it began, I really missed Geraldine a lot. I thought it was just right to set up at a place that had such good memories of her. At first, I'd go down on the weekends, and I'd take my little silver trailer. I'd set up tables during the day and sail during the day, and then sleep in the trailer at night. And then come Sunday night, I'd head on back to Oak Ridge. Later on, I got truckloads of things from the supply house in Marlow. They cleaned things, they got things from the county dump and cleaned it up. And it was going so good. My grandson Jason and me made arrangements to tear down one of them dormitories in Oak Ridge, like the one I lived in before I married Amos. They agreed to give us all that wood if we would do the tearing down. So we brought it all back here and built our first permanent building. Then I bought me this used double-wide trailer, and me and Jason gutted the insides and remodeled it for a nice place for me to live. I really need to be here 24/7. Otherwise, people rob me blind. Well, I had really good memories of this place. Oh, but, sometimes some men come by and act like they want to buy something, but that's not what they're really here for. One time, one of these old wannabes, he said, Hazel, when are you going to let me take you to bed? And I answered back real quick, when I get too feeble to get there by myself. I done outlived 11 husbands, and I don't intend to have no more. I do enjoy a bedfellow now and then. A woman asked me once, Hazel, when did women stop having sex? And I said, I'm 83 and I ain't there yet. Actually, I'm in pretty good shape. I got all my teeth, I can hear right good. I only wear glasses for reading. I still got plenty of brown hair and my gray hairs on my head. I don't take much medicine. I think medicine is when you're sick. And if I ain't sick, I ain't taking it. I can still dance. Well, maybe not quite as fast as I used to. But I still go down the side of a music barn on a Saturday night sometimes. And every once in a while, I'll go to the McMillan County Senior Center in Athens, where they have buck dancing every Friday night. Only, I don't think I exactly qualify as no senior. As I told you, I'm heading out of here first thing in the morning. Oh, I hate it in some ways, but it'll be good to spend more time with my family in Oak Ridge. And right now, me and this woman Julia are writing a book about my life. As I thought about it, it's been real good to look back over the years and see what I've accomplished. I ain't claiming to be no angel, but I think my mommy would be proud. I don't lie or steal, like she said. I don't drink whiskey, and I don't date no married men. I ain't quit cussing, but most of the time, if I call someone the son of a bitch, he ain't no stranger. My life began with poverty and abuse. But all in all, it's been a pretty good life. Of all the things I've learned, the one that means the most to me is that no matter how hard things is, you can overcome and be happy. Well, I better get to bed. My movers will be here at the crack of dawn, and I want to be rested up when they get here. I do so hope they're good looking.